There's a car in Illinois with a signed letter proving it's the original Munster Koach. There's a museum in England that spent decades telling people the exact same thing about a different car. There's a third one that showed up in Florida, and even the people who put it on display aren't fully sure what they've got. Three institutions, one car, 60 years of people insisting they know which is which. And that's before you get to the part where George Barris built an entire second Munster Koach by hand, on purpose, with his own crew years after the show ended, because somebody built an unauthorized one first and he didn't want it out there representing him. This isn't a story about a car that vanished. It's a story about a car that multiplied. This is the Munster Koach, what it actually was, what it became, and why nobody can fully agree on where the real one is sitting right now. In the fall of 1964, CBS had a problem. They had a sitcom about a family of friendly monsters living in a rundown house on a street nobody would drive down twice, and they needed a car. Not a car that looked spooky, a car that looked like it belonged to people who thought spooky was normal. A family station wagon if the family happened to include Frankenstein's monster, a vampire, and a werewolf kid who just wanted to fit in at school. They went to George Barris. By 1964, Barris wasn't just a customizer, he was the customizer, the man who'd already reshaped what a special car could mean on television and in film. But even by his standards, the timeline was absurd. 21 days. Not 21 days to plan, 21 days to have a finished, camera-ready, drivable car sitting on a soundstage. 21 days doesn't buy you a design process. It buys you a decision executed fast enough that nobody has time to second-guess it. The decision started with a sketch, and the sketch cost $200. Barris brought in Tom Daniel, a show car designer, with a gift for making something look dangerous and adorable at the same time, and paid him $200 to draw what would become the Munster Koach. Daniel's original version was supercharged, a hood scoop punched through the front end, thin, round disc lights instead of the ornate lanterns that ended up on the finished car. It was aggressive. Barris looked at it and made a different call. 10 carburetors instead of a blower. 10 chrome individual air horns fanned across the top of the engine like a pipe organ, and lantern-style headlights instead of Daniel's discs. The supercharger got cut. The theatricality got dialed up somewhere else. It's a small decision that says a lot about what Barris understood the assignment to be. Not make it fast, but make it look like it belongs to a family that finds skeletons charming. Who actually built it is where the record gets messier than you'd expect for a car this famous. Most accounts, and this includes decades of magazine coverage and the show's own official materials, say the build started with Tex Smith and was finished by Dick Dean, Barris's shop foreman at the time. But Barris's own later book, Barris Kustoms of the 1960s, co-written with David Featherston, tells a different version, that it was actually Les Tompkins and Bud Coons who built the television car, starting with a hand-fabricated 133-inch wheelbase chassis. Two credible sources, two different crews. Both can't be fully right, and there's no surviving paperwork that settles it cleanly. So this is a reported detail, not a confirmed one, and it stays that way here rather than getting smoothed into false certainty. What isn't disputed is what they built. 3 Ford Model T bodies were cut apart and grafted into one 18-foot chassis, stretched to accommodate a family that needed room for compartments most cars don't have, a laboratory space for Grandpa, a handsome cab rumble seat perched at the rear for Eddie. The frame was hand-formed. So was the brass radiator, the fenders, 500 hours of ornate rolled steel scrollwork, worked by hand into something that looked like a hearse designed by someone who genuinely liked hearses. Gloss black pearl paint, blood red velvet interior, a month's stereo tape deck, and a Sony television tucked into the cabin because even a Monster family car needed a few 1964 luxury touches. Under the hood, a 289 cubic inch Ford Cobra engine pulled from a 1966 Mustang GT and built up with John's high compression pistons, an Iski cam, and that signature bank of 10 carburetors feeding Bobby Barr's dragster-style exhaust headers. A 4-speed manual, a Ford 9-inch rear end. This wasn't a prop dressed to look powerful. It was genuinely built like something that could move, on a frame stretched almost 20 feet with a dropped axle and split radius rods up front to keep the geometry honest. Total cost, roughly $18,000 in 1964 money, close to $200,000 today, for 21 days of work. The coach appeared in more than 20 episodes across the show's two-season run, and it showed up again, on different wheels, in the 1966 feature film Munster Go Home. It became, alongside Grandpa's drag car, Dragula, the visual shorthand for the entire show. You could recognize the Munster family from a still frame of the car alone before a single actor came into view. That's a rare thing for a prop to earn. Most television cars are furniture. The coach became a character. Here's where the story stops being about a television show and starts being about what happens when a car becomes valuable enough that people want a piece of it, authorized or not. At some point after the show ended, someone built an unauthorized reproduction of the coach, not with Barris's involvement, not with his blessing, just built on the bet that a convincing copy would be worth something on its own. They brought it to Barris directly, apparently hoping he'd buy it, put his name behind it, make it official. He declined. What happened next is the part that doesn't get told often enough. Tubbs Johnson, Barris's own paint man, someone who'd worked inside the shop that built the real thing, bought the unauthorized car himself. He later sold it to J. Orberg, a name that shows up again and again in Hollywood car history as a collector and builder of movie vehicles in his own right. So the fake coach didn't disappear into obscurity. It moved through people who knew exactly how good or how flawed a copy it was, and it kept circulating anyway. This detail matters because it means the confusion around which coach is real didn't start with fans or auction houses years later. It started inside Barris's own shop, while the man who built the original was still alive to say no to it. In 1983, some accounts say 1982, and the year itself is a minor enough discrepancy that it's worth naming rather than pretending the record is cleaner than it is, Barris auctioned off the original Munster Koach. It went out with oversized gas lights and different tires and wheels than it wore on the show. Small changes accumulated over years of use and appearances. A year later, in 1984, Barris needed a Munster Koach again, this time for the Hollywood Christmas parade, and rather than borrow the one he'd just sold, he had Dick Dean build a second one from scratch, authorized, built by his own team, with Dean's son Keith helping on the project. This second car got a full restoration in 2011, fresh black pearl paint, new brass lantern lights, a smaller skull radiator cap, period-correct pie crust slicks on the rear. So by the mid-1980s, there were at minimum 3 Munster Koaches with some claim to legitimacy floating around: the original television car, now sold off, the unauthorized bootleg that had passed through Barris's own paint man and into J. Oberg's hands, and a brand new second official coach that Barris built himself specifically because he didn't trust the unauthorized one to represent him. That's already a tangle. It gets worse when you try to find out where the real one lives today. The strongest, best documented answer is the Volo Auto Museum in Volo, Illinois. Multiple independent sources, including reporting that specifically checked for supporting paperwork, confirm that the car on display at Volo comes with both a certificate of authenticity and a letter of authenticity issued directly by Barris Kustoms. That's about as close to confirmed as provenance gets for a 60-year-old television prop with no factory VIN trail. Volo is the answer that holds up under scrutiny. But it's not the only answer that's been given publicly, in print, by people who believed it. For years, the original Munster Koach was said to live at the Cars of the Stars Motor Museum in Keswick, England, a claim that shows up in enough older coverage that it wasn't some fringe rumor, it was the accepted answer for a stretch of time. That museum has since closed, which quietly ends that claim without ever really resolving it. And more recently, a separate claim surfaced pointing to the Orlando Auto Museum, except the same reporting that raised it also noted that car appears to be a replica too, which means even the people passing the claim along weren't fully sure what they were vouching for. None of this makes Volo's claim wrong. If anything, it's the version that survives contact with actual documentation. But it says something about how thin the record around famous television props really is, that a car this recognizable, this photographed, this merchandised, could still generate 3 separate "this is the real one" claims across 3 countries, decades apart, without a single clean paper trail connecting them. The honest version of this story isn't "the car is at Volo, mystery solved." It's that a prop built in 21 days for $18,000 became valuable enough, iconic enough, that authenticity itself became contested terrain, bootlegged within a year of the show existing, rebuilt from scratch by its own creator within 2 decades, and claimed by museums on 2 continents well into the 2000s. Volo has the paperwork. Volo is where you should go if you want to stand next to the strongest claim. But the real Munster Koach has meant different things to different people for most of its existence. And that's not a loose end this script is going to tie off with more confidence than the record actually supports. If you want a Munster Koach of your own, you're not shopping a used car market. You're commissioning a recreation, and the market for that is more active and more legitimate than you might expect. Barris Kustoms designated an official subcontractor for these builds, Advanced Restorations in Sacramento, California, the shop responsible for at least one of the exacting recreations that's crossed a major auction block in recent years. That's not an incidental detail. If replication accuracy matters to you, that's the name to know, because it means there's a documented chain between Barris's own organization and the shop actually cutting metal. And these cars do sell, publicly, with real numbers attached. At Barrett Jackson's 2025 Scottsdale auction, a Munster Koach recreation from the extensive Dr. Stuart Berkowitz pop culture car collection sold for $100,100 with no reserve in the same sale that moved a companion Dragula recreation and dozens of other television and film vehicles. That gives you a real, current anchor point for what a museum-quality build commands today, not a guess. What separates a convincing recreation from a shortcut isn't the bodywork. 3 Model T shells stretched onto a hand-built frame is achievable, if labor-intensive for a serious builder. It's the details that get skipped when someone's trying to save time. The 10 carburetor induction setup instead of a simpler single-carb substitute, hand-formed brasswork instead of cast reproductions, period-correct lighting instead of whatever's easiest to source. The recreations that actually hold value at auction are the ones that didn't cut those corners. If you're chasing the wildest 1960s custom car aesthetic to actually own and drive, this is one of the rare cases where you can buy something close to the real experience, not just a static replica, but a running car with the same engine architecture and the same absurd presence the original had. It's not cheap, and it's not something you commission on a whim, but the path exists, it's documented, and it's a genuinely different proposition than most film and television vehicles, where the original is gone and no legitimate builder is standing by to make you a new one. We tend to think of authenticity disputes as a modern problem, something that started with deep fakes or bootleg sneakers or NFTs promising to solve provenance forever. The Munster Koach was generating competing "this is the real one" claims before most of the people making them were born. A shop employee bought a bootleg before the show had even been off the air a full year. The original creator built a second, fully legitimate version of his own car because he didn't trust the fake one to speak for him. Museums on 2 continents told visitors, in good faith, that they had the genuine article. None of that makes the car less real. If anything, it makes it more real because a prop nobody cared about doesn't get copied, contested, and rebuilt by its own maker. It just gets scrapped. Somewhere in Illinois, under museum lighting, there's a car with the paperwork to back up the strongest claim anyone's made. That's probably where this ends, for now. But "for now" has been the honest answer to this question since roughly 1965.